Dobro jutro.
Good morning, honorable colleagues, honorable members of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, Your Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure and honor to welcome you on behalf of the standing delegation of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly Serbian delegation, and on my personal behalf to wish you a very warm welcome once again and a pleasant stay in our country. It's my particular pleasure to wish a warm welcome to MPs from 23 member states and the associate members to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. We have here delegations from 13 member states of the Parliamentary Assembly, 9 associate members states delegations, and also we have regional partners and delegations in the status of observers. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to wish a very warm welcome to the representatives of diplomatic corps in the Republic of Serbia. There are 21 embassies representatives present. They're all here, as I've been informed, or they're on their way. Among the participants of the 88th Rose-Roth seminar, we have the representatives of the ministries of the Republic of Serbia and other state institutions, representatives of international organizations, members of the academia and civil society. In the end, I would like to wish a warm welcome to our speakers and representatives of International Secretariat of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, headed by the Secretary General, Mr. Hobbs. Honorable participants of the seminar, I'm very pleased to host this seminar on behalf of the National Assembly in a year where we mark the 60 years of NATO Parliamentary Assembly. I hope that in the coming 3 days you will have an opportunity to exchange views and to debate issues on our agenda. I would like to wish you a pleasant stay in our country, in our beautiful Belgrade. I wish you successful debates and positive impressions from Serbia that you will carry back home. I would like to thank you again for your attention, and I would like to give the floor to the first Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Ivica Dačić, who is a Minister of Foreign Affairs of Serbia and at the same time the Chairman in Office of the OSCE.
Uvaženi potpredsjedniče Narodne.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, Honorable Deputy President of NATO Parliamentary Assembly, Members of Parliament, Your Excellencies, I wish you all a pleasant stay here, and I would like to welcome you on behalf of the holding of the 88th Rose-Roth here in Belgrade. I'm convinced that this seminar, within the framework of the interparliamentary dialogue, regular interparliamentary dialogue, will contribute to better understanding of the issues of importance for Serbia and the region of the Western Balkans on our path towards the European membership and the strengthening of regional cooperation and security. I can acknowledge that the Republic of Serbia, due to the reform processes in all segments of society and the building of trust, international trust in Serbia, the promotion of the regional cooperation, has become a factor that contributes to great extent to security and stability in the Western Balkans. The long-term stability is one of the common priorities of all states in the region. We will continue to invest our efforts aimed at promoting political and economic stability of Serbia and the region of the Western Balkans, aware of the fact that the improvement of the regional cooperation and the process of reconciliation is a means that can bring us all the mutual trust and common interests achievement. Regional cooperation is one of the key foreign policy priorities of the Republic of Serbia, and we have built a constructive dialogue in the region as a precondition for development and prosperity of this part of Europe. At the same time, the regional cooperation is increasing the pace of the European integration of the Western Balkans and creates conditions for the infrastructural networking, economic growth, and the improvement of the living standards of the people here. At the same time, it provides for successful realization of the political and economic priorities in the region. Serbia, as a state that is investing efforts to become a full member of the European Union, is encouraged to continue on a path of integration, along with the number of challenges that it has to face, is aware that the Western Balkans is part of the European community, and the stronger connections in the region will step up the Euro-Atlantic integration for all countries in the region that has such a priority in front of them. As you know, the first and the most important strategic goal of the Republic of Serbia is a membership to EU, and there is the widest possible social and political consensus on this issue. Serbia perceives this path as a historical chance to modernize its country and to bring in changes in accordance with the European values and standards. The important political decisions that have been adopted by the Republic of Serbia government have recognized and acknowledged by the EU, and this framework we expect even stronger support of the member states of the EU. And in this context, we expect soon to open new negotiating chapters with the European Union. The positive tone is encouraging, the positive tone of the European Union that has been noted in the recently adopted resolution of the European Parliament on the progress report of Serbia, and also Madam Federica Mogherini, during its visit to Belgrade last week, have conveyed the very positive information that the first chapters are going to be opened by the end of this year. I would like to reiterate our readiness, in accordance with the suggestions presented in the resolution and the progress report, that we will continue to implement key reforms in order to fully meet all European standards and norms. You know that this is the year when we commemorate 40 years since the signing of the Helsinki Final Act, and this is the year where we have taken up the chairmanship in office of the OSCE. This is a very complex geopolitical moment. And OSCE is an organization that gathers a plethora of states that take part in different political, military and economic integration. Regardless of these complexities, all states have recognized the importance of OSCE as a decision-making platform that has the purpose in settling of crises. The crisis in Ukraine is at the top of agenda, not only of OSCE, but all other forums that consider the security issues in Europe. Serbia respects territorial integrity and sovereignty of all member states, of all states of the United Nations, including Ukraine. We are convinced that the crisis in Ukraine can be solved only by peaceful means and diplomatic means, with the political will and full commitment of all stakeholders. When we speak about our cooperation with NATO, Serbia is military neutral and is not an aspirant to NATO membership, but at the same time it perceives the clear space for further improvement of cooperation within the mechanism of partnership for peace. NATO recognizes and respects the uniqueness of Serbia And at the same time, Serbia recognizes the importance and the role that NATO has in the system of regional security. First and foremost, the role that it has in maintaining peace and security, especially the security of Serbian community in Kosovo and Metohija, whose guarantor is NATO. Serbia wants to be a reliable, responsible and predictable partner and interlocutor of NATO in order to achieve the common contribution in preserving peace and stability in the region. Our active participation in the Partnership for Peace program since December 2006, including the meeting of Prime Minister Vučić and Secretary General of NATO Stoltenberg at the Munich Security Conference in February this year, as well as the visit of the Defense Minister and my visit to headquarters of NATO in March this year, confirm our commitment clearly. The adoption of the Individual Partnership Action Plan on the 15th of January this year will give a special contribution to further promotion of cooperation in all fields of common interest. Serbia wants to deepen cooperation to a mutual benefit, even though it does not have the wish to become a NATO member. I would like to wish you constructive and successful debates during this seminar and to wish you a very pleasant stay in our country. Thank you for your attention.
Zahvaljujem gospodine Dačiću. Sada imamo priliku.
Thank you, Mr. Dačić. Now we have an opportunity to ask three questions. Ask Mr. Dačić three questions that he will answer. Today, since Serbia has a very vivid diplomacy every day, since it is since the Prime Minister Vučić is in power, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Italy is visiting Serbia today, so our minister has to leave soon. Hopefully you do have some questions for Mr. Dačić.
Kolega iz Jermenije, gospodin Pogosyan.
A colleague from Armenia, Mr. Pogosyan.
Very interesting presentation, Mr. Prime Minister. You touch many, in kind of a very encompassing way, issue of the regional cooperation and presented a very interesting idea, I think, in you, that the regional cooperation is really serving as a process for reconciliation. In that regard, can you present some examples of the programs? Because I think in the world, a lot of people talking about cooperation, and specifically on the regional one, but real projects are sometimes driving toward the geopolitical fights than really appreciating logic of cooperation. And in that regard, I would truly appreciate some deliberation, specifically from the Serbian point of view. What are the elements of that regional cooperation, and in reality, how it could be served as a process for reconciliation for the Balkans and in general in this region? Thank you.
Tell you one thing. Unfortunately, our region is not that famous for cooperation. It's much more famous for conflicts that happened in the past. They say even that the term Balkans can be interpreted with different meanings, and I can see that there is the member of parliament from Turkey. They can tell us what two Turkish words mean. Bal word and kar. They have a special meaning in Turkish. Can you tell us what these two words mean?
Kan means, bal means honey, kan means blood.
Medical.
So it is honey and mud. I'm not sure if it's the true interpretation, but basically we can talk about history and use these two words to explain it, honey and mud, or blood. So there have been a lot of conflicts in this part of the world, and therefore the mutual trust building is essential. Mr. Bakir Izetbegovic once told me, he's the leader from Bosnia and Herzegovina, who told me, whenever you start talking about reconciliation, then the major argument starts, then we start to blame each other. Who has to say the first word to excuses and offer excuses for his country. So there are a lot of irrational talks in our region. We have a lot of problems with the issue of borders. In our case, there is a lot of issues or insensitivities when people are talking about the Kosovo and Metohija. We're not going to deny the right to self-determination, but we cannot accept self-determination, unilateral self-determination, and secession from one state. This possibility opens up new possibilities for new precedents in other parts of the world. And in this context, it's a very sensitive issue. The issue of sensitivity is also present in the regional cooperation. Whenever we want to have all-inclusive cooperation, we have problems because we want to demonstrate the uniqueness and the differences that exist in our region, but at the same time we want to cooperate. So the only possible regional cooperation in our region is the cooperation based on the interest, on mutual interest, and therefore we have to demonstrate much more maturity. And I believe that we have reached a stage when we are trying to focus more on the projects that are of regional importance. Recently in Pristina, we have had meetings of foreign affairs ministries and communication ministries of the countries of the process of cooperation in the Western Balkans, 6. And we have agreed on a basic communication network, and the Prime Minister will present this project to the European Union on the 21st of April, if I'm not mistaken, with the desire to attain financial funds much more easily, because it's going to be a joint project. At the same time, we are organizing and looking forward to a new Western Balkans conference. It's going to take place on 27th of August in Vienna. So the process of reconciliation is not an easy one. Unfortunately, here in our case, it lasts much longer than it should be. So here we have representatives of countries that took part in the Second World War, and afterwards they built up together the community on coal and steel, and afterwards it was transformed. And they have found a common interest, a common denominator, and we, on the other hand, for the past 20 years we've been going in circles and are not managing to leave this vicious circle. And we need this because we want to build this region as a region of peace and security. Therefore, European Union is an important factor that will bring peace to this region. The idea behind the European Union has a positive character, can be used as a medicine to heal the wounds of this region, and therefore the European Union has to be aware that the talks about the enlargement fatigue is not true by no means, because they should be careful when they're allocating means to other countries. But when we talk about mechanism at hand for tackling the crisis and bringing peace, then the enlargement policy is the key one, the most important one. And therefore, the Western Balkans should not be out of the focus of the European Union, our European partners. Of course, because you come from Armenia, you have your own problems that we consider in the OSCE. Also, there is a Minsk group that is focused on this issue, but for the past 20 years, this group is not contributing, has not contributed enough to finding solution to this issue, first and foremost the issue of Nagorno-Karabakh. Therefore, all region is a unique in a way. OSCE has its own mission in 14 different states, and I was a participant in one such seminar, Rose-Roth seminar. It was in Ohrid during the 90s in Macedonia. And we talked about future of the Western Balkans. I think that we have not been fully aware of how deep the crisis is, how huge problems are, not only in Serbia and the region. Please. Thank you. Honorable colleague from Spain, Galido, can take the floor, please.
Thank you, Minister. I'm interested in the conversation between the European Union and Serbia. And my question is, which are going to be the most difficult issues, in your opinion, the most difficult issues, the most difficult chapters in these conversations? In particular, I'm interested in the chapter related to rule of law. That's my question. Thank you.
The negotiations on membership will last because there are 35 chapters to be negotiated on. Usually, the most important and the most difficult chapters with Chapter 23 and Chapter 24. The Chapter 23 is focused on justice. Chapter 24 is focused on security and fundamental human rights. But when we speak about Serbia, first I will mention other countries. The last chapter, Chapter 35, I don't know what kind of your agenda is today, but usually at the end of all agendas, you have other issues at the end. Somehow, we have a tradition to say that usually the most important things are kept for the end. So in this case, it is also the case in the negotiations with the European Union. So the last chapter is dedicated to dialogue with Pristina. So that is the most difficult chapter. So Serbia has this one unique, specific negotiating path, and there is a paradox we have to deal with. So we can do whatever you want, whatever you require to be the champions, but if we do not move forward in the dialogue with Pristina, it's to no avail. It's useless. So we are already ready to start negotiation on Chapter 32, for example, but we cannot start negotiations because there is a position of certain countries, such as Germany, that we cannot open other chapters before we open the most important one, chapter 23, 24, and chapter 32. So that is the core. That is where the problem lies. And the other problem is that the chapter 35 has not precisely been defined, and all participants in the screening process do not know basically when someone will be satisfied and when the positive decision is going to be reached, or a negative one is going to be reached. Thank you. Thank you. We have two more members who have applied for a question, but we have a question from representative from Poland, please.
Thank you very much. I also would like to thank you for your very interesting introduction. I have one question. Could you tell me what is the Serbian vision of regional security architecture, including relation with Russia as well, in very general view?
We think, and we talk about security, regional security, it should depend, it is reflected in our cooperation or mutual trust between different states in the region. And if you're asking me about the cooperation with Russia, Serbia has traditionally good relations with Russia, as with other Slavic countries. When I visited Ukraine, in the eastern part of Ukraine there is a place called Slavjano-Serbsk. Serbs are very close to Ukrainians as well. With Russia we have traditionally good friendly relations, but there is no dilemma, and we are not questioning the matter of becoming a member state of the European Union or any other process of integration, such as the Eurasian Union or something similar, because there was never on the agenda such an issue. Russia has never proposed this to us, so there is nothing to choose from. We are clearly committed to a European path. We would like to build and maintain good and friendly relations with both sides. And if we talk about security, we do not have security issues. We're not building security through cooperation with other countries. We are not building up our national security. We are a military neutral country. We have been neutral during Tito's times. We have not been a member of nor NATO nor Warsaw Pact, and therefore our position is much easier than the position of other countries, and we are going to stick to this position today. We do not have any military arrangements with Russia, nor with Russia or any other country, and we're not planning to have anything in future. We have joint activities with Russia, as we have with NATO. Mr. Ambassador knows this, and Minister Gašić has mentioned this, and we have much more developed military cooperation with the NATO member countries and with NATO than with Russia. And it's not a news, but when we have a military cooperation with Russia, then it's the news. It's on the news at front pages. As you know, Serbia also has a special observer status in the Organization for Collective Security, and led by Russia. It's a Russian organization. And I think that here there are misconceptions and prejudices about the Serbian policies and whether Serbia has some kind of special interests that are opposing the interest to become a member state of the European Union. It's a misconstrued image, and we're not hiding the friendly relations that we have with Russia. There are many more European countries who have also good and friendly relations with Russia, and there are even those European states that have increased the export to Russia since the economic sanctions have been applied. So we have only one chair. We're not sitting on two chairs. Thank you.
Thank you. Our dear colleague, guest from Pristina, Mr. Nenad Rašić. Thank you. My name is Nenad Rašić. I'm from the Parliament of Kosovo. Mr. Dačić, you know very well the situation in Kosovo, and we'll have a concrete question related to security as well. Namely, there is assumption that in forming of the so-called armed forces of Kosovo, there should be an agreement, there should be voting in the assembly, and those military, barracks should be built in Kosovo, and already existing ones should be transferred into Kosovo armed forces. We have joint activities with representatives of NATO, and we know that from the security aspect, this would mean a lot to Serbia. I want to know whether you believe it would be good if this transformation would happen within the armed forces of Kosovo. And from the security aspect, how would this influence and impact the Kosovo Serbs? We are against the transformation of the security forces into armed forces or for forming the Kosovo army, because it is not in line with the 1244 resolution of the UN Security Council, and this resolution is still valid for Kosovo. Of course, we believe this could have certain consequences for the security in the region. Why? Because when war in Kosovo, conflict in Kosovo was finished, the only armed forces that were predicted for Kosovo were international forces, or KFOR. When the Brussels Agreement was signed, Hashim Thaci, Catherine Ashton, and Alexander Vučić and I were at NATO headquarters, and NATO guaranteed that no armed forces will be formed. Armed forces of Albania will be formed without the approval of NATO and KFOR. Therefore, this is a very complicated issue, and we believe that it should be discussed at the level of the UN Security Council. The other party doesn't want this because we believe that this is now, the others believe that this is the issue to be solved by the government in Pristina, but we disagree with this. And on the other hand, we are interested in peace and stability and dedicated to it, peace and stability in Kosovo and Metohija. We want to continue the dialogue with Pristina. Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Ivica Dačić. We are going to resume with the work in line with our agenda. He's going to continue with his work. He's going to host guests from Italy. Thank you, Mr. Dačić.
Sada
Now, unfortunately, a Speaker of our Parliament, Honorable Maja Gojkovic, is ill, so she cannot address you today. However, on her behalf and on behalf of the National Assembly of the Republic of Serbia, Mr. Bečić will address you. He's the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly of the Republic of Serbia. Esteemed members of NATO Parliamentary Assembly, esteemed colleagues, Your Excellencies, honourable participants, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure to bid you a warm welcome on behalf of the Speaker of the National Assembly of the Republic of Serbia, on behalf of MPs of the Serbian Parliament, and on my personal behalf. It is a particular privilege for the National Assembly of the Republic of Serbia to host the 88th Rose-Roth seminar, and this is the third time that it is held in the House of the National Assembly of the Republic of Serbia. Let me remind you that the 52nd Rose-Roth seminar was held in March 2003 and in Belgrade, and the last Rose-Roth seminar held in Belgrade was the 67th one in October 2007. I'm particularly pleased with the fact that we have gathered today in such a large number, having in mind that there are parliamentarians from 23 states, many esteemed speakers, numerous observers, representatives of the diplomatic corps and of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly International Secretariat. This 88th Rose-Roth seminar has a particular importance because it is held in the year of the 60th anniversary of NATO Parliamentary Assembly, and it is also the 60th anniversary of parliamentary diplomacy in the field of security and defense policy, having in mind that the NATO Parliamentary Assembly has passed a long way since its beginnings in July 1955, when about 160 parliamentarians from 40 NATO member countries gathered in Paris until today. Honourable guests, since I also was a member of our standing delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly for 8 years, I'm aware that this kind of meeting is a good opportunity to consider current and regional security issues, and this time the focus is on regional cooperation during the European integration process of the Western Balkan countries, fight against corruption and crime, and on many other topics that are very important for this region. I'm particularly glad that in the next couple of days during the seminar, you will have an opportunity to, among other things, find out in detail about the priorities of Serbia's internal and foreign policy, particularly in the field of defense and security, its relations with NATO and the EU, and about issues such as the dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina and the developments in Kosovo and Metohija. Honourable participants, I hope you will feel pleasant and welcome, and that the 88th Rose-Roth seminar will be successful both in considering the issues on the agenda and in the exchange of experience, opinion and improvement of cooperation between our parliaments of NATO Parliamentary Assembly member and associate countries. In this regard, allow me to emphasize the good and successful cooperation that the standing delegation of the National Assembly of the Republic of Serbia has had for years now, and in various forms with the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, but also with the international secretariats of this multilateral parliamentary institution. I'd like to thank particularly to the Secretary Hobbs. And Serbia here tends to give an active contribution, develop partnership relations. This 88th Rose-Roth seminar will most certainly contribute to the continuation of this successful cooperation to mutual pleasure both sides. Allow me to welcome you once again to the National Assembly of the Republic of Serbia and to wish you a fruitful work in the forthcoming days. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Mr. Bečić. And now I'll give the floor to Mr. Paolo Ali. He's our colleague and Vice President of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly.
Excellencies, dear colleagues, distinguished participants, first of all, I would like to express my gratitude to Deputy Prime Minister Dačić to Deputy Speaker Bečić and Mr. Shormas, head of the delegation to the NATO PA. Thank you for inviting us to hold this very important seminar. We are grateful for your excellent organization and hospitality. I would also like to thank the Swiss government for its continuing support of the Rose-Roth seminars, which are crucial instruments to assist our partners in democratic transitions, reform processes, and Euro-Atlantic aspirations. I'm glad that we will hear from Ambassador Ruch in a minute. Our seminar comes at an important time. Europe is going through one of the most dangerous phases in its recent history. We are facing a combination of internal and external challenges in the east and in the south of our continent. Protracted instability across the Middle East and North Africa forces millions to leave their homes. A hateful ideology is spreading in this part of the world. And sadly, some of our young men and women become intoxicated with these ideas. Some have even committed gruesome acts of terror on European soil. The Western Balkans are not immune to this phenomenon. Between 50 and 70 Serbians have joined the ranks of radical extremists. This is a common European problem. This is why we dedicate a full session to this problem. We are also faced with new Russian assertiveness. Russia has occupied and annexed part of another nation's territory and continues to provide assistance to separatists in eastern Ukraine. This is a fundamental threat to the post-Cold War rule-based system. This system might not be perfect, and I think many in Serbia and elsewhere in Europe would share this sentiment, but it is the best system we ever had in our continent's history. We cannot let it be ripped apart. On a more positive note, a big part of our agenda will be about Euro-Atlantic integration in the Western Balkans. I firmly believe that Serbia's future lies in a Euro-Atlantic integration. However, it is of course up to the Serbian people to determine their own future in the Euro-Atlantic area. You can be part of the Euro-Atlantic family in many different ways. Today, your government and parliament are firmly committed to Serbian membership of the EU. In contrast, it seems unlikely that Serbia would like to become a member of NATO, at least for the foreseeable future. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. I know that many of your citizens worry what the EU membership and an evolving NATO partnership would mean for Serbia's independence and foreign policy choices. Whatever your choices will be, integration into Euro-Atlantic structures will only be successful if your population is fully on board. It would be a mistake to sweep their worries and questions under the carpet. They must be answered in a fully transparent manner and with hard facts. This is why discussions like the one we will have are so very important. Serbia and NATO have built durable partnership over the last 10 years. Both sides have always looked towards the future rather than the past. Practical cooperation has been the focus ever since NATO and Belgrade cooperated in crisis management operations in South Serbia in 2001. Since 2003, you have been a member of the Partnership for Peace program, and just this year, your government signed an individual partnership action plan. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that with this plan, NATO and Serbia have found a good platform to discuss how their relationship should develop over the coming years. And this seminar will certainly provide us with new ideas. In terms of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, we have always supported close cooperation with the Serbian delegation. We always come to Belgrade with great enthusiasm to discuss your challenges, and our common challenges. To conclude, let me once again thank Mr. Shormas and his team for putting together a great program. Over the last few years, we have had a great delegation from Serbia that brings a positive outlook on further cooperation, and Mr. Shormas has been a driving force behind this attitude. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sincerely looking forward to our discussion over the next few days. Thank you.
You've made me blush. Thank you, Mr. Paolo, for your wonderful words. The introductory remarks of His Excellency, Mr. Jean-Daniel Ruch, Ambassador of Switzerland to Serbia and Montenegro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice President of the Parliament of Serbia, Mr. Vice President of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, distinguished guests, members of Parliament, it is my turn to express my great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Swiss government at this 88th Rose-Roth seminar. As many of you already know, there is a tradition of Switzerland supporting exchanges between parliamentarians in the framework of such seminars. The Swiss assistance to and cooperation with parliaments does, however, go well beyond the Rose-Roth format. In Serbia, for instance, Switzerland is an important partner to the parliament. We have several projects which aim at reinforcing parliamentarians' capacity to develop independent views and opinions, to sustain and enrich their country's democracy, and also to serve as genuine representatives of their citizens. The Rose-Roth format is all the more important as it allows dialogue not only within the country, but which includes also experts and members of parliament from a vast range of NATO partners and allies. Since 1990, the Rose-Roth seminars have been fruitful meeting places to exchange on a broad diversity of thoughts and opinion. It has been reminded here that in October 2007, for the last time, the Parliament of Serbia hosted the 67th Rose-Roth seminar. While the focus on that day was on Serbia and Europe, challenges and integration, this time the seminar will address a broad range of issues which are of a common concern to all of us under the title Serbia, the Western Balkans and the Euro-Atlantic community. Through its participation to the Partnership for Peace and the Parliamentary Assembly of NATO, Switzerland solidly underlines that it fully shares the values on which both institutions are based. Even though Switzerland remains a neutral country and has no intention to join NATO or the European Union, it wants to show its solidarity in supporting and promoting these values. We firmly believe that stability and security in the Euro-Atlantic area can only be achieved through cooperation. Conflicts must be solved through dialogue. Most often, the use of force doesn't solve conflicts but aggravate them or create new ones. These are very much the thoughts which have inspired our OSCE presidency last year. I want to mention also the Geneva Center for the Democratic Control of Armed Forces, which has maintained a very long commitment to Serbia and to the region. Focused on democratic governance of the security sector over the last decade, DCAF has engaged with the Parliament of Serbia, the Ministry of Defense, the Armed Forces, and also the civil society. The Swiss commitment in this region is a long-term one. We have been one of the main donors in this country, and people from this region, from the whole region, represent 5% of the residing population of Switzerland. Therefore, our continued support for the Partnership for Peace and the Rose-Roth seminars is a modest but clear sign of our commitment and of this engagement. I would like to end by expressing my sincere wish that the presentations and discussions will produce new insight, ideas and options, most importantly on how to successfully overcome persisting and new challenges affecting not just the region, but all of us. And some of these challenges have been mentioned by the previous speaker. This success is of importance to the people living in the country as well as to all of us. In that sense, I wish you all an interesting, lively, and mutually beneficial discussion. Thank you for your attention.
Hvala gospodine Ruha. Sada će uvodne napomene.
The introductory remarks before you start posing questions are going to be delivered by Mr. Ivan Vejvoda in front of the German Marshall Fund. He is a Senior Vice President for Program German Marshall Fund. Honorable speakers, Your Excellencies, dear friends, it gives me great honor to have and the privilege to be here today and to address you all on the 88th Rose-Roth seminar. And as previous speakers, I will start by referring to the first seminar that took place in this very same hall 15 years ago. It was on the 20th to 22nd March 2003. It was a week after Prime Minister Zoran Đinđić was assassinated. It was a dramatic moment when some of your colleagues or some of you were here as well, the representatives of NATO Parliamentary Assembly, when Serbia was faced with probably one of the major challenges after democratic change in 2000. But as the late Prime Minister stated in those days, a few days before this horrible event, that even if such thing happened and he is to be eliminated, no one can take Serbia away from the path that it has taken. In those days, Serbia was aiming towards the full membership in NATO until the vote took place in the Assembly that Serbia keeps its neutrality. So we have a long history that has been marked with very dramatic moments, but I have calculated there have been 20 or 20-ish Rose-Roth seminars in the region. The first issue that Rose-Roth seminar was dedicated to was the issue debated in the then State Union Parliament. New Hope, New Ideas was the title of this seminar then. So we have taken a long path. Montenegro is an independent country. Slovenia joined NATO. Croatia as well, and Serbia, together with Bosnia and Herzegovina, has joined Partnership for Peace in Riga in 2006. So many of us desired to join Partnership for Peace sooner, to get integrated into these cooperation processes, but it has been postponed as the Council of Europe membership was postponed. So I will have to remind you that we have joined Council of Europe in the state of emergency after the Prime Minister was assassinated. So why am I mentioning all these things? Because whenever we are to decide on our membership in some kind of organization, it's much better to join these forums, to join these organizations much sooner than later. So I truly believe that it would be much useful if Serbia could start negotiations on individual chapters during this year, not to have this postponed for the next year. Why is it important? Because we want to take part as an administration in these projects of the European Union sooner than later. So it's important to mention, no one has mentioned this before me, that we have Adriatic Charter since 2004 that Albania has joined together with the United States. In 2008, Montenegro and Bosnia and Herzegovina joined, and Serbia has become an observer state in 2011. And I think it's very important. And I think the last but not least that I think that Turkey and Greece have been full members for the past 60 years, and it's very important for this south part of Europe. I can only wonder what would happen if these two important countries have not joined, having in mind their rivalries and their conflicts. So I believe that all these integrations are very important. Integration processes are very important, and this part of the world, Balkans, represents 16 million people, and it's like eternal court or yard, garden of the Europe, and all those countries are willing or are desiring to become full member states of the European Union. So we have understood why the peace project, such as the European Union, is important. We are lucky, geographically lucky, that to live here, to be living here, because we have this engine that can guide us towards peace and that can prevent us from stepping into another conflict as we experienced in the past. So we are marking 20 years since the Dayton Peace Accord or Paris Agreement. If we could compare similar moments in history, it would be similar to 1965. And when you try to understand how Europe, to what extent Europe actually developed over the past 50 years, so when Mr. Dacic is referring to the slow pace of our integration, you have to bear in mind that actually all others have taken a lot of time to reach the moment we are now in. So we have to invest a lot of efforts to deal with open issues, still unresolved issues. And I believe that in April 2 years ago, the agreement that has been signed between Belgrade and Pristina under the auspices of the European Union and Catherine Ashton has been a historical moment. And it demonstrates that we are ready and that we are willing to face the reality, that we are aware of our past difficult moments from our history. But if we are conscious and aware, fully aware of how we have to improve our societies, the only path we can take is the path of compromises. They are not easy compromises, only difficult ones are before us, but we have to be more serious in tackling these issues. And we know that the whole world is a very, very difficult economic situation, and people are living in destitute. The standards of life are declining, and the unemployment rates are soaring, especially the youth unemployment rates. And we can link this with the problem that Mr. Paolo Ali has referred to. So we have people who are foreign fighters that are now taking part in different paramilitary structures. So we have talked about this issue, and we will continue talking with Ambassador Paolo Gentilini. And especially when you try to analyze the whole context of the south of Europe with the north of Europe, with the east part of Europe, with issues in Ukraine and the breach of territorial integrity and sovereignty and the annexation of one part of its territory, the Crimea. So we are facing very burdensome problems, and this part of the region is truly an oasis of peace. And the fact that we have managed to reach this moment after years and decades of conflicts, to try to keep quiet and to be wise, to see what we are to do after this precipice, and to see what can be achieved, and to see what can be done after new states have come out of the former Yugoslavia that fell apart. We have to understand that a lot of things need to be done. a few weeks ago, 8 or 9 people have been apprehended, arrested, and those people took part in the Srebrenica genocide. Is actually a true signal how this country is facing with its past, and the very fact that we have done this and we have completed our ICTY duties, we have arrested Mladic and Karadzic, and that these two indictees are currently in The Hague, that we are truly responsible when we are considering our European future. This has to be done by others as well, by other countries from the region, and only by doing this in the best possible interest we will face our future and bring positive future to our citizens. So our citizens need much safer future. They need safe job opportunities. They need money to bring food to their tables. But in order to achieve this, we have to deal with pending issues. We have to resume talks with Pristina. We have already achieved in February justice and agreements. Federica Mogherini visited Belgrade and Pristina a few days ago, and we have talked about this. It is important, but the state is not a key stakeholder. In Metropole Hotel a few days ago, representatives of the civil society, both from Serbia and Kosovo, have organized a meeting within the framework of one project that is dedicated to a cooperation in the segment of practical policies development, and I believe this was the largest meeting of representatives from Belgrade and Pristina since the conflicts ended. And I believe that these kind of exchanges, these kind of meetings need to be continued. We have to organize this constantly. Germany has the leading role in the European Union, and the process of integration needs to be continued, resumed through infrastructural projects and changes. Next meeting within this process is going to take part in Vienna in the end of August. It's going to be also organized along with the meeting of the representatives of the civil society. And if we truly want to bring peace to this region, and if we truly want to bring prosperity to this region, then all segments of the society need to be involved. And we have to always have checks and balances. We always have to have, on one side, strong state and government, and on the other side we need to have the strong civil society and free media. The media and freedom of speech is a key element of democracy. If we cannot critically analyze the acts of government and be constructive in our arguments, then the democracy will not succeed. Even the most responsible governments have to know this. And we can achieve this if we, day by day, invest our personal efforts in bringing this to light. This year, we are marking this very important day, the 40 years since the signing of the Helsinki Final Act, when the then state, Yugoslavia, signed this act as well. This is a key document for the European security and for the global safety, because all member states who are very active have signed a document that, to put it in simple words, is actually reaffirming the principle of territorial sovereignty and integrity. It has been underlined and reaffirmed today in Europe, and it's very important for the OSCE after Switzerland and before Germany, that will take over after Serbia chairmanship in office. this is the only path that can lead us to our future. And Germany, that is, I will repeat once again, a leading country together with France, and together the President Hollande and Chancellor Merkel can take over ownership over this process and to continue with the Minsk process, consolidate the Minsk process that will bring sovereignty back to Ukraine, but at the same time tackle issues of possible autonomy for those who live in the eastern part of Ukraine. It is a very important moment, and this very small country that from the Western Balkans, Serbia, is also an active stakeholder in these developments. Yesterday, some of you have seen that Mr. Jens Stoltenberg, Secretary General of NATO, has held some talks in the European Union, has mentioned that European Union and NATO have to bring much closer, have to achieve much closer cooperation, having in mind the positive results achieved so far. And I will also like to repeat his words. NATO is a key stakeholder for us in this region, and it was a key actor after the conflict, because NATO personnel is maintaining peace and bringing peace to all people and all communities that live in Kosovo and Metohija. And after the April Accord has been signed in April 2013, all the participants went to the headquarters of NATO to sign the agreement. And so this is a very important to mention. And when we are trying to see where we are going in Serbia in the framework of NATO partnership, we have adopted the individual partnership action plan in 2015, and hopefully in December at the ministerial meeting we will try to even go further and to strengthen further this framework for cooperation where we exist. I will also repeat what we all know, that Macedonia was supposed to become a member, was supposed to join NATO together with Albania and Croatia in 2009, but due to the very famous problem and the issue with the name, the dispute that exists between Greece and Macedonia, this did not happen. So I think that we as neighbors and as friends of these countries, we have been friends throughout history, we should try to weigh a means to convince them to try to find a very difficult compromise solution in order to consolidate our regional security situation and in order to make Macedonia move forward on this path that it has taken a long, long time ago. It has reached the threshold of NATO membership, but somehow we cannot go over this threshold. I believe that this is, if you look from the side, it seems insolvable, it seems very difficult, but everything can be solved. There are solutions to every issue, so we have to try to find them. One famous historian said that we have to get rid of the fear. And actually, another president, very famous one, said that what makes us fear the most is fear itself. And we as representatives of citizens, we have to try to face these fears and try to bring prosperity to our people in the most difficult moments. Isaiah Berlin, the famous philosopher of Lithuanian origin, said that the definition of the responsible government is to try to avoid sufferings and pain. Unfortunately, our politics in the 90s was the politics of pain and sufferings, and afterwards we have governments that are trying to use peaceful means that will bring peace and stability, the rule of law, positive international relations based on the key human rights is something that we will bring our future, successful future. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Voivoda. When Mr. Hobbs and I agreed, and we're actually arranging the organization of this 88th seminar, I promised the Switzerland would be, precise and stick to the rules, but that's simply not the case. However, we still do have time for questions and answers, about 20 minutes. The first to take the floor, the supply to take the floor, is our colleague Norwuza from Azerbaijan.
Thank you so much. I would like to appreciate Serbian and say thank you to Serbian colleagues for the organization of this seminar. And I would also like to appreciate and thank to the speakers who mentioned different approaches and different topics, because dealing with the Balkanian problems, because these problems are very similar to Caucasian problems, especially with the problems of defining borderlines, and it seems that it is very likely the situation on the Caucasus. And the ambassador was also very good in his speech, and he mentioned a lot of different questions, and Mr. Kurutko, NPC, who deals with the issue of solving of Nagorno-Karabakh, the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh. This is a very long-term conflict which exists for 20 years, and this we never received any good advice which would refer to both sides. Usually, people who come there come as tourists and they leave as tourists, and there is no salvation to this problem because there is a dual standard, double standard, which exists in the world. And as I can see, the resolution of different committees in Russia, which announced by the Parliamentary Assembly of NATO, and I have been participating in this assembly for 15 years, and I know this work very well. And I think that there is also double standard, because Russians are invited, because Russia is interfering with the interior policy of Ukraine, but the situation which happens on the territory of Azerbaijan and Armenia, they are also invited. So where is the standard? Where is the attitude, and what relationship how can we solve this problem, and if we deal with one country in one way and with the other country in a different way? So because of this, I think that international organizations should consider their resolutions, and they should treat each country equally, not in a different way. So, and when I take a look at this program, we see that there will be a seminar in Armenia, and there will be the question whether this seminar will take place or not, because we need approval from Russia, because without the approval of Russia, the seminar cannot be taken place. And I would like to advise our colleagues to come there, because I would like to give several examples whether we are supposed to go there or not. 2 years ago, in Armenia, there was a meeting of ombudsmans. Armenian ombudsman told the truth, which the Armenian government did not like. And during the following days, Moldavian ombudsman was arrested. And then there was international help, which helped to release this ombudsman. And on the territory, so in the relationship between Armenian and Azerbaijani countries, one member of the delegation was detained in the building of the airport. When they when one of the representatives of Armenia wanted to visit Azerbaijan, one of them was killed. And so you have to keep in mind, you have to think whether you are supposed to go to that country or not. So this is...
I understand, no problem.
I would also like to say, so if their attitude will not be changed, there will be conflicts and wars in the world. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. I'd like to ask all of my colleagues to stick to the items on the agenda, to stick to the rules that apply in the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. Of course, you can always give some short explanations, but please ask questions to the panelists. This is most important. The next who will apply to take the floor is our esteemed colleague, his colleague from Armenia, Mahapetityan. Hopefully I announced your name well.
Welcome NATO Parliamentary Assembly and Serbian delegation to NATO PA for organization of Rose-Roth seminar in Serbia. Secondly, dear colleagues, the topic of our seminar is Serbia, the Western Balkans and the Euro-Atlantic community. And speech of our Azerbaijani colleague is black propaganda and false statement, and as usually we look such kind of behavior in all of Rose-Roth seminars. As you remember, our delegation, Armenian delegation to NATO Parliamentary Assembly, took part last year in Baku in Rose-Roth seminar, and we had opportunity to discuss all of the issue of source caucuses and the conflict of Nagorno-Karabakh. And you know that OSCE Minsk group is only one framework and format for negotiation of Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. And regional cooperation and good neighborly relations continue to play a pivotal role in maintaining peace and stability in the Western Balkans. In this regard, my question is about the confidence-building measures that have been successfully developed and implemented in this region, particularly by initiative of German Marshall Fund. Thank you.
Thank you. The third question, and then we'll start with the answers. I have to speak in English now, sorry.
Colleague Mr. Lord Hamilton of Epsom from United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Velvoda mentioned the question of the Ukraine. Of great importance to those countries that are supporting the Ukraine is the sanctions regime. I gather Serbia is not signed up to these sanctions, and indeed, worse than that, much of the sanction breaking is actually going on through Serbia. So European countries who want us to continue to sell to Russia sell through Serbia. Is this going to change?
Thank you. I don't know where did you get this data, but okay. Who'd like to give the answers to this? Mr. Vejvoda, you would? I can answer concretely, this question concretely. It has two parts. First, it relates why does not Serbia participate in the sanctions towards Russia? First of all, Serbia was not required officially, neither by the US nor by the European Union, to impose sanctions. Some individuals asked Serbia to do this, but the fact that Serbia in this phase, just before the beginning of the negotiations, and nobody from the US and EU wanted to put pressure on Serbia and to undermine something much more important, that is to make progress in the dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina, which was initiated by Ms. Catherine Ashton and which resulted in signing of this agreement. It is clear, of course, that Serbia will have to change its foreign policy in line with the EU foreign policy in future. I believe there are precise statistical data on this, and our foreign policy is in line 60 to 70% with the EU foreign policy. I believe that our officials are very well aware of this, and that we will see how Serbia approaches its foreign policy with the EU foreign policy. And when it comes to whether the goods are transferring through Serbia and thus sanctions to Russia are being broken, I have heard this data for the first time. I mean, I'm not aware of this. If anyone else knows anything more about this, please answer this question. Thank you. I can only say that the trade the trade with Russia has reduced significantly. All the statistical data proves this, so I really don't know where you got such information that you told us. This is absolutely not truth. The trade with the EU, between Serbia and the EU, is about 17 billion euros, and with Russia about $500 million. So, you know, and now it's even lower owing to the situation in Moscow, that, you know, situation with ruble and other crises in Moscow. So the data you gave us is not verified and most definitely not truth. If there are no further answers of panelists to these questions, then let's move on. Mr. Pogosyan from Armenia would like to take the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's already becoming a tradition that it doesn't matter in which region we're starting discussing issue, finally we're getting back home. But in any way, first of all, I would like to welcome Ivan here, saying for a long time we have been kind of chasing various conferences, and now I'm very glad to be here and ask you your part of the questions. But before that, just a small presentational element. First of all, I think world is changed. Globalization and free media, about which have been a few times mentioned here, is really presenting us a very good opportunity to learn what's going on in the world in different places without what we'll say where. We perfectly can check. To understand who has been arrested when, for how many days. I perfectly understand when the society living in the closed and no information provision, where the freedom of information is not exist, when the civil society guys are arrested, and when so many people are afraid to say the truth, it's totally different, a problematic society. But in any way, world is changed, and we can judge by ourselves where is the truth is going on. But my question is following about similarity to the logic of double standards, but double standard from the approaches about peace. First of all, I'm very glad that you mentioned about Helsinki Final Act, but unfortunately you mentioned only one principle of that Final Act. There's also right for self-determination, but there's also another very important standard: resolution of the conflicts only by peaceful means. And I would like, on that regard, ask you to deliberate about a very interesting point, actually, maybe I got from the translation, but I believe that it's true. Politic of peace. What do you mean that we need to change whenever we were saying politic of peace? Is it about that dialogue is a very important issue? Is it about that we need to really think in a peaceful way and not to shoot everyday guys on the border? Is it about that whenever civil society are meeting and discussing some peaceful or peace-building initiatives, later on they can easily go back and not be arrested and put it in the jails and being accused of their violations or, I don't know, betrayal? Or everything is just about politics of peace? Is very nice words at the conferences, but it's not the real things that's going on in the practice. And on that idea, I would like to really ask, whenever you're talking that we need a politic of peace, do you mean it's only a simple dialogue? Because I know that dialogue is very important, but still, like my colleague which is sitting near me seems don't want to meet me anymore. And like, why Armenia is not excluded from there and there. I believe that Armenia can prove to everyone by really its behavior, and there is no need to comments for our neighbors. But the last point that I would like to mention, that I would be very glad to see everyone here in June in Yerevan at the Rose-Roth seminar. And I think Armenia, as its partner with the NATO, really prove that its own decisions are taken by the interest of its own nation. And it's really doing. And many times not dictated by someone, but doing something out of the interest. And being a very unique, specifically, is the only country of CSTO participating in 3 peacekeeping operations together with NATO. Is the only country who contributed to many places in a bigger number for the contributing to the security, international security, and not just simply a consumer. And Armenia is a very devoted country, specifically on the reform side, together with its 6th circle of individual action plan, which we're already having. It's meaning like more than 12 years Armenia is cooperating with NATO in that regard, which is very unique. But please, just give some ideas about politics of peace with your name.
Thank you, distinguished colleague Domenico Scilipoti from Italy.
Thank you. I apologize, but I will speak Italian, and therefore you will rely on the translation. I thank the last speaker for the quality of his report and also for the balance of the whole discussion. And I would like to ask the speaker who mentioned fears. Which do you think is the fear that affects Serbia most? What is the most important fear for Serbians, and how could it be solved? What fear should be addressed, and what are the prerequisites for addressing this fear in Serbia? Thank you.
I još jedan naš uvaženi kolega.
Another colleague will pose the question, and then we will resume with the answers. Mr. Greening from Ukraine.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for invitation and for the possibility to take part in this seminar, which is extremely important for Ukraine and this very important for Ukraine time. I think I would like to speak in Russian because I want to be heard here, and I would like to ask the following question to Mr. Voivoda. In his report, in his presentation, he mentioned Ukraine in the context of autonomy of several parts of Ukraine. I'm not sure which part did you mean, and I would like to hear which part of autonomous Ukraine you mentioned. And that is the first question. What is the second question? We have the problem which should be mentioned because Crimea is in fact is annexed and occupied, and that is the part of Ukraine which according to our understanding, does not have a different status, and one part of Ukraine is occupied. That is the decision of Ukrainian Parliament. Today, some data of United Nations was published about the killed in the east of Ukraine, and that is about 7,000 people. And definitely, Ukraine is looking for mechanisms, actual mechanism for cessation of this conflict, stopping of this conflict on the territory of Ukraine, in order to stop aggression of Russia and occupation, Russian occupation on the territory of Ukraine. There is no other organization which would prove more effectively its ability to stop these conflicts or conflicts of that kind as NATO? And I have the question to the presenter. Are we talking the same language?
I will start from the last question. I think that, yes, we do speak the same language, and I was quite clear. I'm not sure that anyone has mentioned anything but what you have mentioned. So we are supporting territorial integrity and sovereignty. We do not want to recognize the annexation of Crimea, so the victims that have suffered is something that is unacceptable in Europe.
7,000, not 70, but 7,000.
As regards the autonomy, I'm sorry, I'm not an expert for this issue, but I read in the papers 2 or 3 weeks ago that your parliament has adopted a resolution on a certain form of autonomy for eastern part from Donbass. That is so if I'm mistaken, then I will withdraw my statements, something you have voted on in your parliament. Maybe you could explain to us what has been adopted in the Ukrainian parliament during the break. But what we had here, so what we want to say here is that we have to find some kind of solution. So we have to feel free in our own skin to do utmost and everything that the organization of OSCE is doing under the chairmanship of Serbia is to try to find a peaceful diplomatic solution for this conflict. Whether it's going to happen or not, we're going to see in the coming days, the months, but the fact is that the whole world is afraid that things might get worse. So we are all looking forward to new solutions, and Ukrainian is trying to implement deep reforms, economic reforms, because we all need structural reforms in order to improve our economy. And as regards the issue of the honourable member of the Italian Parliament about the fear, I believe that the most stronger fear is the economic apprehension, that is the growing inequality all over the world, the gap that are becoming larger and larger. And this is the most striking challenge, not only here in the countries that are less developed, even in the United States. More and more people are afraid of decline in their living standards. So governments, if they're responsible, if we're talking about this extreme of avoiding the extreme sufferings and pain, then the governments have to do their utmost, have to do everything in their power to keep this standard of living, and the citizens are also willing to suffer if they perceive governments that they're truly working responsibly. So, of course, there are a lot of principles that have been enumerated in the Helsinki Final Act. I believe that there's 9 of principles, so self-determination is one of them. Also, it has been one of the principles of the UN Charter. But we all know how things are done in peaceful ways. So conflicts need to be tackled. We need to be solved. People who are involved in finding solutions to these conflicts, people who are taking part in the dialogues, in the negotiations, are those that are the most responsible. And I believe that we, as citizens who are true patriots, have tried to find solutions that will bring peace and prosperity and the whole society. And leadership, the leaders, or the courage that each individual can demonstrate is of key importance, and it will be a guideline that we can follow in order to bring peace. So very difficult decisions need to be taken at the very beginning. Citizens or people are trying to oppose them, to reject these decisions, not to accept these decisions, but after some time they become aware that that is the only thing that can bring peace. So since 2011, we have managed to achieve this agreement with Pristina in April, and I'm pleased that things are developing in this direction, and this is the direction that we can lead us to the stability and peace in the region. Thank you. Before we conclude this session, I will try to repeat the words of the Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Ivica Dacic, and that is the fact that Serbia supports and sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine and all UN member states. This is a fact, and in the framework of OSCE we are committed to finding peaceful solutions to this crisis. I hope that this introductory session has been completed successfully. Now we have 15 minutes break, coffee break, and afterwards my colleague Dubravka Filipovski will resume as the moderator of the second session. Thank you.